Hey guys, it's Kira here, and I am doing a very belated September wrap-up, and I also still have to do my October wrap-up. So I debated on doing one video for both, but I ended up doing two separate videos because I didn't want to have to review 16 books in one video. I just think like that's a little bit much. So I decided to go ahead and keep up like with the monthly wrap-up rather than like a full summary of everything that I've read like the last couple of months. So the September wrap-up will hopefully be coming out pretty soon. So let's go ahead and get into what I read in August. So one of the first books that I ended up reading is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. And this is the same author that did Red, White, and Royal Blue. I honestly I loved the characters in this. I love the relationships. I love the found family trope. I loved like all of the characters, all the representation for the characters. This is a sapphic dominant time travel romance kind of. There's only like one person like that actually time travels. You have August, who is new to New York City, and every day she rides the Q. And every day she sees this girl, short hair, leather jacket, beautiful, can't take her eyes off of her. So in order to save money, she ends up moving in with a ton of roommates, and these roommates are so wonderful. One of the roommates is a trans psychic. The other one has a relationship with them, and then you have Wes, who is attracted to the drag queen across the hallway of the apartment building. So there's just so much representation like in here, and I love it to pieces because of that. Overall, like this book was kind of like really interesting. They spent like a lot of the book trying to figure out like what was causing like the differential like in time between Jane being on the queue and the rest of the world, and like how it might have happened, and they were trying to figure out a way to help her so that she's no longer stuck on the train. Before she meets August, everything is so blurry, and then things slowly start to clear up. This is such a beautiful romance, and I really loved the romance and the characters and everything else. One of my biggest complaints though about this book is that there are just some things in this book that just feel like they were forced in. There is this plot. August is kind of like a little bit of a detective, and she's looking for, I guess it was her uncle, because her mom has been really kind of wanting to know like what happened to him. And there was some things like in this having to do with him and like the final like resolve with everything that felt way too convenient for me, and I was not happy like with where that particular storyline kind of ended up. I felt like it was just too convenient. It was kind of interesting with the whole like uncle and everything else like missing for like years. But I feel like that was such an unnecessary plot point in this whole book. And if they had left it out, I don't think we would have missed it. Like, it didn't feel like it was that big of a deal. Like, I mean, they could have like gone like into just saying that she and her mom like used to play detective and she's got really great detective skills. But instead, like they they elaborated on that portion of it, and I was really kind of like, I did not like that particular like element of the overall story, because I felt overall like it felt so unnecessary like to the greater plot line. Another thing like that I'm kind of like that I wish would have happened like in this book, I wish it would have gone like one step further. So at the end, like I feel like we didn't get like enough of seeing, you know, like the resolve of the story and how things progressed. And we didn't get like enough of like the after effects like of everything and like of our main characters and all that. So I would have liked also to see like the story just go a little bit further. I ended up rating this a 4 out of 5 stars because while I really loved the characters, I love the friendships, I love the representation, I love all the relationships, there was just a couple things in here like that just didn't sit right with me. And you know, I really would have liked to have like added some, you know, like towards the end and taken away like that plot point having to do with her uncle. The next book I want to talk about, I've been alluding to, it is A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir, and this is the final Ember in the Ashes book, and I finally finished it, and it was amazing, and it tore my heart to pieces, and I loved every second of it. I thought like it was so amazing, and all of these books were 5-star reads for me, hands down. Like, they were just so good. I liked how the series kind of had a Romanesque type feel to it, but then we had Jinn and prophecies and like all of like this stuff kind of just mixed in like to a melting pot, and all the elements like that were included in this worked so well together. they just kind of seamlessly came together. I felt like everything pretty much was explained. I know like that there was a character in here that Saba Tahir got me attached to just so that she could rip my heart out with him, and I am really upset with her for that. And like at the same time, like though, like I mean it was also character building for one of the main characters. Yeah, so I ended up rating this a 5 out of 5 stars because like while it really like ripped out my heart, like I felt like everything like that was in here was very well placed. I felt like all of the plot points were very well explained, and they went into great detail to explain them. I didn't really have any lingering questions after everything was said and done, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was so wonderful, like, and so fun. The next story that I read in the month of September was The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. I listened to this on audiobook on Audible. If you get like the monthly credits, like they do have some audiobooks that come with those monthly credits for free. You don't have to spend an extra credit to get them. And this happened to be one of them. I have been seeing this around everywhere, and I've just decided that, well, I'll give it a try and see how I feel about it. Overall, I felt like the tone didn't match the content a lot of the time, and that was like my biggest complaint about this. Well, actually I have a few complaints about this, but I felt like Laura, our main character, was super serious. She was kind of like a trained assassin, and I know like for the sake of romance, like you have to keep stuff like, I guess you have to keep like it like a little bit light, but I felt like the fact that, you know, she had been trained as an assassin, and the civilization like on the Bridge Kingdom is very, very hard to live there. I felt like it was just a little bit too light for the content that we had, and I would have liked to have seen it go a little bit further. Also, like, it didn't feel like I had like a ton of emotional connection like to these characters, because they just felt so 2D, and they didn't feel like tangible people. And I feel like if you are looking for like maybe a quick light fantasy, you know, kind of like romance with a little bit of spice, because honestly like there's only one sex scene in here, everything else is just kind of like working up to that, like up to that sizzle. And I felt like this could have done a lot better job of like fleshing out the world, like understanding like, you know, like more about like, you know, the politics, because like they kind of touched on the politics, and they kind of talked like a lot about it, but I feel like we didn't like really get a chance like to truly like dig in more depth with the cultural stuff. And I feel like this happens a lot like when we have a short paranormal romance or fantasy romance, because like it always seems like you're trying to balance like, you know, the personal relationships with the building of the world. And because the books are so short, it's hard to do both, and it's almost impossible to do both to get a really good taste out of, you know, like good fleshed out characters and good fleshed out world. And this was no different. I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5 stars because it was interesting. Basically, like, Laura is this woman who has been trained as an assassin, and she is supposed to marry the king of the Bridge Kingdom to kind of like spy on him and figure out like the secrets of the bridge so that her people can invade. Basically, like, you know, she spends like the whole book like being this trained assassin, and she has all these skills. And I mean, the king is like really smart. Like, another thing too, like, that really bugged me about this is like he's really smart. He kind of like knows what's going on, but like I feel like being as smart as he was, he should have figured it out like a lot sooner, like blinded by love or not blinded by love. I feel like the character that he was like didn't figure this out soon enough, and it just kind of drove me crazy. The next book I have to talk about is In the Watchful Kingdom, and I actually did a full review on this, like where I talk about a lot about this more, so I'm not going to do a ton of talking. I will put a card up that links the full video to this. And this is actually really an interesting science fiction story, and it's not super long, but it is super dense, so the length really doesn't make a huge difference, like when you think about like how much like there is to this world. And the characters in this, both the main characters are non-binary, and they both are not quite human, but they're kind of humanoid. I will say like too, like that this book has a trigger warning of suicide and discussions of suicide. Enema is our main character, and they are a cloistered extrasensory human who watches over the city, and they discover not everyone is happy. Anima is kind of like this person who is connected to the tree. The tree is called the Gleaming. One of the visions, like that, one of the visuals that we got is like those mushrooms that sit underneath the trees, and they kind of form a symbiotic relationship with the tree. Well, let's look at Anima as the mushroom, and we'll look at the tree as like the greater form of consciousness. And Anima can kind of see like a lot of different things that are going on. Anima can take the form of many different types of animals. If a bird can fly, they can fly with them. They have like this like wonderful ability like to be able to take on multiple things. Anima never gets hungry, and they have like this way of kind of conducting themselves. And it's really like, it's such an interesting like concept too, because they use like so many different pronouns that I've never heard before in this that are actually discussing Anima, but I've never heard of them before, so it kind of threw me off. And at first, like, I wasn't sure if the author was discussing like using like these multiple pronouns as being different characters in this that were connected to Anima, or if they were different aspects, and it turns out they're different aspects of Anima. And I really like that use because I feel like it brought a lot of depth to the story. One day Anima is kind of watching the city, and this person, Vessel, comes in and has a suitcase full of these objects. And because Anima's lived her entire life in the Gleaming, in the city, she's kind of experienced a utopian-esque society. But Vessel brings Anima all these objects that allow them to experience life outside the Gleaming and to acknowledge the fact that things are not perfect. And each item has a story to it. And the only catch is that Anima has to leave something behind with Vessel in order to hear the stories. This is such an interesting concept, and I feel like for as short as the story was, we could have gotten a lot more emotional depth from it had it been longer. And I would like to have seen them go like into like a little bit more emotional depth with it, because while it was such an amazing story, amazing science fiction story, and it was so different from a lot of the other science fictions like that I've read, especially because of the non-binary representation in it, I wanted more emotional depth. I feel like even though they discuss suicide and all these other things, like I feel like we could have gone more into the expansion of Anima emotionally, and I feel like that was such a missed opportunity for this book, so I ended up rating it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I'm going to discuss, I also have another full review for. It is Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. After I did the review for this, I got to looking, and apparently like this is an older story of hers. This is not a more recent publication. This is a publication like that she had a while back, and they republished it into its standalone novel. This is another like one of those books like that's around 232 pages, and it seems short, but it's got a lot of lore, like vampire lore to it in Mexico City. This book has been described as a neo-noir vampire book written in an alternate version of Mexico City, and it follows several perspectives. Alt, our main character, is kind of like the original Mexican vampire, and she has like these abilities like where she feeds, and she is able to like one of those things like the butterflies have, like to feed off of flowers, like that's kind of like what she uses to feed. And she grows wings, and like very eclectic, very different. This whole mythology like in this entire book is super different for when it comes to vampires, and I liked how eclectic it was and how we had multiple types of vampires in this, which really added variety and also like added to the intrigue of the story. Don't want to go too much like into this. If you guys are interested like in a full review, I do have that video of course posted as well. But I will say like this, like that this was a breath of fresh air concerning vampires, because it does have so many different types of vampires. I really loved that about this book. And there were so many, like, there was actually like so many things I loved about this book. And there were so many things like that I didn't, particularly like one of the things like that really stands out for me that I did not love about this book was the fact like that it felt a little bit too short for the amount of mythology like that we had. I feel like there was like some characters like that we got a lot of attention to, and some that were underdeveloped. And I really enjoyed this story, but I really like wish like that they had it as a series, so like that we could see more of these characters, more of the vampires, and be able to explore more of the mythology like without having to look at the glossary at the back to get more of a taste of what this world really was. All in all, I ended up rating this a 4 out of 5 stars. So it seems like August was the month of 4 stars for me. I have quite a few 4 stars here. So the next one I want to talk about is XOXO by XO. And this was so much fun. It was circulating, it's a YA contemporary circulating around a girl named Jenny who is Korean American, and she actually meets this boy like one night. They have a wonderful time, and she doesn't see him again for 3 months until she moves to Korea temporarily with her mom to take care of her sick grandmother. And when she goes to the school, she sees that this boy is there, and come to find out he is a K-pop star. And it kind of sends like everything kind of like spiraling like into like this fun romantic kind of, I don't know if I would necessarily consider it a comedy, but it is like a lot of things as far as like being just a fun friend group and get together, and like it's just, oh, it's so good. If you are into K-dramas and you like K-dramas, this one will probably be one that you will absolutely love. And this is written like a K-drama, but it's really fun because you get like a lot of these supportive friend group. Since it is a K-pop band, like you get like a lot of the band members who are just wonderful, and you get Jenny, and she makes some friends like while she's there, and I just love the romance in this. Like it's really smooth, very light. And normally like the light romances, like I'm not super big fan of because I feel like they lack quite a bit of things, but like actually like I was so content just having the story, which doesn't really happen for me very often, but I found like myself enjoying the story enough that the emotional depth that this lacked wasn't that big of a deal. One thing I wish I would have seen like in this though, I wish it was like a little bit more angsty. I feel like a lot of the K-dramas have a ton of angst in them, and I do not feel like this had a super big ton of angst. I feel like this is like more of a softer, like smoother progression romance, like where they don't play like a lot of head games, and like there's not like a lot of back and forth. It's just kind of like a really like cut and dry like romance, like where like there is some unknowns, because Jae-woo, the main male love interest, is not supposed to have a girlfriend, so there is kind of like a secret romance going on in here as well. So I really did enjoy this, and I ended up rating it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I'm going to talk about is the new Matt Haig book, The Comfort Book, and he is really famous for writing like a lot of stuff about mental health. This is just a very short book, basically. Like it's got some essays in it, it's got some short like little like one page like quotes like that take up a whole page. There's really like not a lot to this book. I feel like this is the book that you read when you're standing still and you're not like really like looking to learn anything more or have like any more expansion. It's just something like that's kind of like, you know, to bide your time. Once again, it is the comfort book. So I don't feel like I got a lot out of this in terms of that. Like I feel like there was like a lot of interesting things about this, but I do not feel like that I was super in love with this like I was with Notes on a Nervous Planet and Reasons to Stay Alive. Overall, I feel like this was only a 3-star book for me. I liked it, but I wasn't in love with it, and I didn't feel like it gave me like the psychological insight like that the other 2 books gave me. I guess I was expecting a little bit more from it because of the fact like I got so much out of the previous 2 books that I read by him that were nonfiction. And these were like more like reflections of Matt Haig at intermediate times throughout his depression, recovery from depression, and everything else. I don't think it was meant to be one of those books like that you get like a lot of insight to it. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with the book. I just feel like my expectations were different than what I got out of it, which is why I ended up rating it a 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, so this is the second Mariana Zapata book that I have ever read. The first one I read was From Luke Off with Love, and I loved it so much. Come to find out, she has written quite a few very slow burn female-male romances, and this is all centered around a woman named Aurora who is moving to Colorado, and she gets there and she's supposed to be staying above a garage, and she finds out that the son is the one who put the ad in online for somebody to come and stay in this area, and the father who finds out about this is furious, absolutely furious, because because the son had been told that they were not going to be putting anybody in the room above the garage. And she gets there, and so like there's this huge like kind of blowout. It's like all like within the first couple of chapters. I loved it because she was just such a positive person in spite of like all the things that she's had gone through. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, wow, it's like you've had some trauma responses here because like, you're kind of she was kind of a people pleaser overall, if I'm looking at this from a psychological perspective. But I did like her character, and I do like kind of like the background, like emotional depth that I felt for this character. And our main male love interest, who is named Tobias, is like this really like serious, very stern, very like cold. I mean, I never got cold from him though. Like I never felt like he radiated cold. I felt like he radiated distant, but it always seemed like when it counted, he was there, and he always kind of like helped her through things. And I really liked that about him. This book had me hanging on a thread the entire time I was reading it. I was just like, oh my god, like when are they gonna kiss? When are they gonna kiss? When are they gonna get together? What is gonna happen? Like emotionally, like this just takes it takes its time. It is like a slow love story and progression into a romance like that is just so memorable. And I really liked how this book didn't care how long it was, because every second I feel like was worth the wait for this romance to progress. And it was emotionally deep, which is something I really look for. If I can have a slow storyline but also have emotional connection, I will be so satisfied, and I will settle for the emotional depth like over with a slow storyline any day. Now when I say slow, I'm not saying like that I was dissatisfied like with the pacing, because I definitely wasn't. I like the fact that this book took its time to kind of like elaborate like on the relationship, and it was kind of great because Aurora came from a really bad breakup. She's kind of healing from a really bad breakup for like a famous like country music star that she wrote most of the songs for, and we got to see like a little bit like of discussions like of narcissism, because her mother-in-law was super narcissistic, and so she had to deal like with that. So you can tell like there was some sort of trauma there. But Tobias, I fell head over heels in love with Tobias. I thought he was amazing, and I loved every second that we had with him. And honestly, like when this book ended, I was sad, because like I would have lived in this book for like the rest of my life and not thought twice about it. This was a 5 out of 5 star for me, and it was amazing. And if you liked Luke Off with Love, you'll definitely love this also, especially if you're big on slow burn contemporary romances. It was everything to me. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is The Heart Principle by Helen Hong. This is along like the same kind of stories as The Kiss Quotient, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars to. Bride Test, which is the second book in this series, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars to, and I ended up rating this a 5 out of 5 stars. Each book in this series follows different characters. Like there's at least one character in each book that's autistic, and I always feel like these books really resonate with me. I've actually been told before like that I might be autistic. I'm trying to find testing for it. But every character that I come across in these books, I always feel like that's me. Like I do all that stuff. And I just feel like honestly, like that these characters, like they represent so much of like what I feel and go through. And all the time, like these books are just so amazing. The only like reason like I rated the second book, The Heart Principle, a 3 out of 5 was because I was not a fan of the main characters at all. But I love the characters in The Kiss Quotient, and this one was just as good to me as The Kiss Quotient. This book is definitely like not a romantic comedy. It deals with death and dying, and it also deals with emotional gaslighting and quite a few other hard-hitting issues. This book was kind of a combination of harsh and tender, and I love the romance between Anna and Quinn. Anna is this woman who was recently diagnosed as autistic. She has a boyfriend who's super like successful but super distant, and one night she goes and she spends some time with him, and he's all like, oh well, I think we should definitely see like other people for now to make sure like this is right for us. I hated her boyfriend at the beginning like so much because she was just so devastated by this. She was kind of a people pleaser, which is something like that you've learned, like, you know, when you go like into mental health and all that, people pleasing is a form of trauma, because like, you know, you, in order to feel loved, you feel like you have to do things in order to make people happy. So you end up bending over backwards at the expense of all of your reservations and your boundaries and yourself in order to make that person happy. And I feel like Anna did this on a consistent basis. Well, she ends up deciding like that if he's going to go off and see other people, that she wanted to do the same thing. So she ends up going onto this dating app and she meets this guy named Quinn, and she meets him, and she's this nervous wreck. Like, she never does this type of stuff. The amount of care in this book between Anna and Quinn was so beautiful and so well done, and I was like so emotionally invested in this whole book. I loved it from front to back. I binged it, and honestly, like, I love how things like were like in this book, like with the characters. Like, Anna is just such a wonderful main character, and it also does touch on like how in the Asian community getting mental health care is kind of like seen as bad. I really kind of appreciate that too. I also appreciate like getting like a better view of like her parents and her sister, who, by the way, I don't care how, like, I don't care like how the story went. I hated her sister. I hated Anna's sister so intensely, and I will never ever be convinced otherwise. That will be the hill that I die on. But I hated her sister so much. She just rubbed me the wrong way too many times in this book. And it really kind of gave me like a taste of like where Anna came from and how like she grew up. And all the time, like the entire time, like during like this, Quinn was kind of like the rock. I cannot rave about this enough. I'm so sad like that there's not going to be any more for this series, because like all these books are just so wonderful. And I feel like because I actually read the Kiss Quotient like when I first got closer, like towards the beginning of my YouTube time. So I feel like this is kind of an end of an era for me, but you know, I just really love this, and I definitely gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The last book I'm going to talk about is Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This is by the same author that wrote the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires and My Best Friend's Exorcism. This is the third book that I've read by Grady Hendrix, and I loved My Best Friend's Exorcism. If I remember, I think I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. And the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying a Vampire gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I really loved both of those. This one, I think, for me, because like this is all about final girls, and if you love 80s horror flicks or anything having to do with 80s horror flicks, I feel like you're really gonna love this, because they allude to so many things. And because of copyright, they couldn't say like, you know, exactly like what franchise it was. But I got like some Halloween vibes in here, and like a lot of like 80s like pop horror films. I felt like there was a lot like injected into this that really made it interesting and fun, and kind of like was great because it kept me guessing as far as, you know, which characters like were from what franchise and everything. And I feel like the main character was also really, really, really well done, because she is just like this really fascinating character who is always ready and on her guard, thinking that it's going to happen again, because like there's super fans out there that, you know, kind of try to recreate like the whole final girl thing with the actual final girls. There's like a lot of memorabilia from the times like that these girls, like not only like the movies like that they made regarding like these incidences, but like the times like the girls like were, you know, trying to survive. And you know, like there's like a whole market for this. Overall, I thought this book was like really well done, but I don't think final girl things are like for me. I kind of struggled also, like there was like a final girls type book that Riley Sanger did as well, and I didn't really like that book either. So I feel like final girl things are just not really for me. I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5 stars. Like I really enjoyed it. Like while I was reading it, I thought it was really interesting. I also found it like a little bit predictable, like slightly, because I basically had it like narrowed down. But I will say like one thing too, like that as much as I had it narrowed down, this book still did manage to surprise me like a little bit. So it was a lot of fun, and I did definitely enjoy reading it. I'm glad I got a chance to. So 3 out of 5 stars for the Final Girl Support Group. Well guys, that is my entire September wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit the little like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell icon if you guys want to receive emails every single time I post. I'm also on Amazon, Goodreads, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Those links are linked in the description below, and I will see you guys again very soon.